this week, Ian picked haunted lighthouses. Ian, what are you talking about?
Okay, well, as I say, I've got a couple, but
Okay.
the one I'm going to start with is actually in our neighborhood here in southern Ontario, and it's called the Gibraltar Point Lighthouse,
Hanlan's Point.
Oh,
which
okay.
is
I've actually
located on.
investigated at Hanlan's Point.
Sounds
Oh, have
familiar.
you?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I wasn't even going to talk about it, but yes, I have.
Yeah. So this lighthouse is located on Toronto Island, and
Yeah, technically Hanlan's Point, I believe.
yeah, on Lake Ontario. And this lighthouse today, even though it's not operational anymore, is the oldest existing lighthouse on all of the Great Lakes.
When was it
Oh,
built?
wow. How cool is that?
It dates back to just before the War of 1812.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that is really old.
That actual building? Because I thought it was rebuilt sometime in about 1840.
That was, they did do some construction, but the original lighthouse itself was
Right.
Just before the War of 1812.
Interesting.
I did not know
And
that.
the very first lighthouse keeper, and he's the one who is said to haunt this lighthouse today.
Yes. And I can attest that there is definitely somebody there.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Oh.
Yeah, I've heard.
Another place that needs a paranormal investigation. I wonder if they'd let us in.
Myself, but that's on my list one day of places to go.
Yes.
So the very first lighthouse keeper, his name was John Radelmuller.
Radelmuller.
Oh.
Yeah. And as I say, very first keeper of the light there. And during the War of 1812, he made his own barrels of beer. Obviously, as they all did, because you didn't just go off to the beer store to go and buy your beer. So the ghost story, and I don't know whether there's any truth to this or not, but the story and then subsequent hauntings, which are still reported today, and Sika, you may be able to shed some light on this, is that soldiers from Fort York, there in Toronto, paid this guy a visit because they wanted his beer.
Right.
And he refused to give them any. And so the story goes is that they murdered this guy for his beer. They hacked up the body, dismembered it, and I've heard that there's actually been evidence. As I say, I don't know, but I've heard there's been evidence that there was like a jawbone found. There were fragments of the coffin. So that's the ghost story that I've heard related to that lighthouse.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot. I mean, let's face it. Originally, that wasn't islands, right? It was just a spit of land that came out, and you could have walked all the way around the crescent by Cherry Beach, come out and walked across to Hanlan's Point. It would have taken you, from where they were, where Fort York is, to walk that distance. I would suspect would have taken you the better part of an hour, maybe more, to get around there. Right. But it became islands later when they were trying to break it up to allow more water flow in and out and to be able to create the breakwalls. And that's for the boat marinas and all of that. Right. So that used to be a spit of land. But yeah, I mean, I've heard the story of the murder, of course, when we went to Hanlan's Point years and years ago. I was a teenager the first time I went over there. There was no nude beach over there.
Yeah.
Nothing then. It was this
changing
little spot on the islands that you could take that monorail train thing that those like zoo buggy mobile things. They used to have one from Center Island, and you could go out and go there. So as teenagers, sometimes we would go out there and hang out at the beach for a bit and that. But they did do tours for a while, and I don't know if they're still ongoing, of the lighthouse. You could go take a tour, and it was pretty much the historical side of it. I don't even remember any ghosts being talked about at that point. But I've been there on my own. Not necessarily on my own, with other people, but we went and we took some stuff with us, and we went and we kind of did a little investigation. And at the time, my other friend, knew one of the tour people, and so we were able to go only into the lower part of the lighthouse. We were not allowed to go up the stairs or anything.
Oh wow!
But yeah, it's definitely got some weird vibes happening in there. It's odd. It's, sometimes when you walk into something, and Rachel, you'll be able to sort of get where I'm going with this. And where you just can't put your finger on what it is. It's just like,
oh yeah, you just know there's something
on here, right? It's like, it doesn't feel negative. You're not afraid of it. You don't feel like you should run or anything.
You're aware.
You're aware, right? But
yeah,
it's a definite vibe there, and I got that vibe when I visited. And it's a cool spot though, and it's really pretty there. And I think that they're getting a little bit more leery of just randomly allowing a lot of people over there now, because you have the houses and everything in the other part of the island, and people live there year round. And so, I think that the lighthouse now is probably more of a tourist attraction than anything. Right? It's definitely geared to being more of a tourist attraction, but it is a cool spot, definitely. And you really kind of feel isolated when you're out there if there's not 60 on the beach.
I bet it does in the winter when it's cold and the season's gone.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I haven't been
very isolating.
The islands really in the wintertime. The residents are sort of stuck there in the wintertime as well. So
crazy.
So what's your other lighthouse, Ian?
Okay. Another one I've got here is called Execution Rocks Lighthouse. And this is located in Long Island Sound, just a stone's throw away from New York City. And again, this site dates back to forever, the American Revolutionary War.
Okay.
And
right.
And it's just this chunk of rock that just sits there in the middle of Long Island Sound. And there were many, many shipwrecks resulting from this rock before the lighthouse had been built.
Okay.
And during the Revolutionary War, leading into why perhaps this location is haunted, the Revolutionary soldiers would take prisoners, and they would take them out to the what would be called Execution Rocks, and they would chain these prisoners up onto the rocks, and these prisoners would drown when the high tide came up.
Right, because we forget that that's actually the Atlantic Ocean there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the ancient past of it. More recently, in the early 1900s, there was a guy named Carl Panzram, who was also known as
a pirate in pink pants from Penzance?
Well, I don't know if he was in pink pants, but he was a pirate, and he was also a serial killer.
Awesome.
And he was known by the name of Captain John O'Leary as an alias.
Yes.
And this guy, he would sail up and down Long Island Sound, and he was accused of, I've got a list, very nasty list here of what this guy was accused of. Murder, arson, battery, robbery, burglary, vandalism, and rape.
Everything.
Yep.
Everything.
He was accused of over 100 suspected murders. When he was caught, he confessed to 21 of them, 5 of which have actually been confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
And what he would do is, after he murdered all these people, he would take their bodies out to the Execution Rock site to dispose of the bodies.
Oh.
So you've got all of this residual, at the very least, residual haunted energy surrounding this location.
So I have two lighthouses, both local to me here.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, one of them is the one behind me.
Oh, cool.
So that one behind me is known as the Mohawk Island Lighthouse. And it's in Haldeman County, technically. It's about a 20-minute drive from my house down the shore. It's one of my favorite places to go and visit. And I say this because this is on an island, so you can't get to it unless you're in a boat.
Oh, right.
It's
okay.
also got nothing left of it. Essentially, the wooden top is missing. The staircase was removed. And you can visit it from September the 1st until March 31st. So I'm not really sure how you're going to get out there in the winter time on Lake Erie. And I shall point out both of these lighthouses are in Lake Erie.
So do they have to sort of withstand some harsh weather conditions then?
Yes. This one was originally built in 1838. And again, because there were so many shipwrecks on Lake Erie, and especially coming towards where I live, which is in Port Colborne, but also Gravelly Bay, called Gravelly Bay for a reason. It's full of rocks. But they erected this lighthouse some distance down the waterfront from Port Colborne. And then they erected a lighthouse at a place called Point Abino or Abino, or however you want to say it. We say Point Abino. It was named after a Jesuit priest who was there in the 1700s. He found this
fascinating
land that juts out into the lake about 2 kilometers long. And it was beautiful, sandy, sort of sand dunes and all. And so he actually found there were indigenous people living there in this location at the time. And so he sort of spent some time there and that, but it's now, weirdly enough, in the Victorian era, the entire point was purchased by a Buffalo businessman who was a wealthy Buffalo businessman and turned it into a private beach and cottage area.
Okay.
So it's still like that today.
Oh, okay.
It's a gated community. You can't just drive into it. To go to the one lighthouse, not this one, to go to the Point Abino lighthouse, you have to go only in with the lighthouse. I guess it's the Lighthouse Appreciation Group, and they have a shuttle bus. So jumping back to that, we'll go back to Port Abino, but this one here, Mohawk Bay, between March 31st and September, it's a bird sanctuary.
Oh, wow.
Right. So there's all kinds of cormorants.
At least it's still in use.
And I just call them shit hawks, really, because it's all kinds of poopy birds that inhabit the island. It gets covered.
Oh yeah.
I think there's like cormorant, and there's different kinds of gulls and terns and different things that actually build their nests there. And so it's a hatchery of sorts. So it's considered protected. So you can't go out and you can't walk all over it and you can't do all these things during that time. But after that, you can certainly visit it, have a picnic there.